Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, listeners, whatever time it is and wherever you are as you're listening to this. Welcome back again, or welcome for the first time, if it is the first time, to the Leading with Integrity podcast. One of the topics that's come up a few times in previous episodes and on some of the social media posts of late is this connection between customer and the people in your business. And there is something of an ongoing debate between whether you should be a people-first company and people-first leader or put the customer first. And I think for me, it's always been you put the people first and then they will look after the customer. There does seem to be some debate. Today's guest, however, is an expert in all things customer relationship and in making those people in your business heroes to your customers. So I'm joined today by Patti Mara, a coach, author of the book Up Solutions, which is all about turning teams into heroes and customers into raving fans of your business.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Patti, thank you so much for joining me from across the pond in Canada. 9:30 in the morning there, I believe. So hopefully a good start to your day so far.
Good start to the day, David. Thank you for having me with Leading with Integrity.
Let's start by me handing over to you and shutting up a bit and letting you tell us a bit about your experience, what you do today, and how you got there.
Okay, great. Well, my degree is in biology and economics. So, it was almost as if, if you think of flow, it's what showed up next. So when I was in university, I worked in a small chain bookstore. And I had a good manager. And so what was interesting is that the manager, it was, very clear-cut, simple rules. If somebody came into the store, you welcomed them, you greeted them, asked if you could help them. If they were looking for something, you took them to the section, put the book in their hand. If you didn't have the book, we, offered recommendations or saw if we could order it in. And we were, again, a small store. We weren't supposed to be doing special orders, and we did it all the time. So a couple of things about that experience. One was that we had very little turnover. It was fun to work there. The shifts went by fast. And most were part-time students working. And so we had good team dynamics. And the thing that I took with me, that little bookstore, so this is in the late 80s, that little bookstore was targeted to do 500,000 revenue that year, and we did just over $1 million. So that stayed with me. And I just found that I had a couple of different experiences, and I always ended up in doing retail training, how to engage the customers, how to present to customers. And that, of course, led into customer experience development. I was fortunate enough to come across Strategic Coach in 1997, and that was the missing piece. That program was the missing piece of how to build an organization around my talent. And that had me go from that I was doing everything to having a team and having a bigger impact. So what I do today is I would say I'm a passionate advocate for independently owned businesses. And I work with businesses to position them for success. I find that most businesses think their business is what they sell, and they're being commoditized, they're being stereotyped. And my argument is what you sell is just a vehicle, whether it's a product or a service, it's just a vehicle for how you deliver value. And so your business is really the value you create. And so I do that. And I also do team engagement training, because your team are your brand ambassadors, probably the most important profit generator in your business. It's like the gold mine in your business is your team. How are they engaging with your customers? And are they set up to win? Are they set up to be your brand ambassadors? I wrote a book, Up Solutions, and the byline is turning your team into heroes and your customers into raving fans. And that's kind of the key ingredient.
That's certainly a recurring theme in leadership as well, is the importance of people. And, it's either a business or it's a leader. Neither are going to amount to much without the people around them and the team that they're working with. So, yeah, very important. Totally agree with you there. What would you say then is the best thing about what you do? What's your favourite thing? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
I love providing the framework to people to feel that they know how to win in their role, whether it's as a leader, as an owner, as a manager, or as a frontline team member. It's really it's providing that framework so people know how to win. I think everyone wants to win, regardless of what they do. Everyone wants to feel like they're winning. Everyone wants to feel good at what they're doing. And in most businesses that I've come across, it's like your team are guessing. The owner, it's in their mind, but they haven't communicated it, and the team's not set up. They don't know the standards. They don't know how well they're doing. There isn't regular communication. There isn't that foundation structure. So people are set up to win. So I love, seeing that pivotal shift. And I only work with teams that are already great because they're the only ones that are interested in working with me because they invest in their team, right? So, but I love taking teams that are already great and having them be supercharged and increasing the dynamic engagement. And therefore it's like creating happy workplaces because people are productive and know that they're being productive.
Yeah. And one of the other things you speak about is this idea of being future forward in your business. So how can leaders achieve that? How can they make their company, their business be future forward?
Especially for independently owned businesses, I think we are in the greatest period of opportunity we're likely to experience in our lifetime. We've had 2 years of global interruption. And, crisis interrupts all patterns. And so obviously there's a dramatic challenge to crisis interrupts all patterns. Everything has to be redesigned. And the opportunity is to redesign future forward. And when I say that, I remember reading an article by interviewed the president of Shopify, which is a company that really took off during the pandemic because their target audience are brick and mortar, helping them get online and create an e-commerce avenue channel for their business. And every business needs to have an online, presence. So the article quoted the president as saying the impact of the pandemic was to forward their business model by 10 years. And I think that's the opportunity. And we tend to keep doing what we're doing, even if we're getting diminishing results. Unless we're forced to change, and we've been forced to change. So this is the time. And how can you future forward your business? Find out who your customers are, what's important to them, talk to them, be over the top in communication with your customers, have your team know how to have those conversations with your customers, find out what they like, find out what they don't like, find out how their needs have changed in the last 2 years. Because your business has gone through an interruption in the last 2 years, but guess what? So have your customers. Their lives have been interrupted. Their needs and wants are different. So if you want to really tap into the opportunity we have right now, is get in communication with your customers. Who are they? What do they need now? How can you deliver on those needs? How can you solve issues for your customers? And then position that as your business. It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It hadn't occurred to me that, but I guess that's partly because of everything else that's been going on in the UK since that. So we're perhaps not quite there yet in terms of coming out of the tunnel, but something to keep an eye on for the future. Definitely.
By the time we come out of the tunnel, the opportunity has changed.
True.
What's happening now is most businesses are trying to get back to normal. There is no back to normal. There is only the new normal. So lead the way.
Something I was discussing with a previous guest, and it's just kind of flashed back in my memory there as you were speaking. So obviously you're quite rightly, the customer input has to be there. And I think any successful service, we've certainly learned that from the software world and things like Agile, putting the user experience first, and particularly when you're building new products. Where do you sit on kind of is it people first or customer first debate?
You mean your team first?
Yes.
I got it. So I would sit with the team first, because for an owner or a manager, your team are your customer. And if you're not taking care of them, they're not taking care of your customer. So it doesn't matter how well you design that customer interface and that customer experience. If your team aren't delivering it, if they're not set up as brand ambassadors, you're not going to have a consistent experience. And you can create an absolute wow outcome and experience for your customers, and your team doesn't deliver that consistently. And so you lose trust. And if you lose trust, you don't have relationship.
I don't want to say that's what I was hoping you would say, but it's the answer that I agreed with. So let's go with that. So let's talk a bit more then. Tell us more about that link between customer loyalty, team engagement, and then profitability for a business.
Yeah. And I love putting all of that together, David. I think that's so important. I think most businesses miss that your team is the number one profit driver in your business. Regardless of everything else, your team are the number one profit driver in your business. They need to be set up for success. And I see so few companies that do this really well. And it's not because, I like the E-Myth Revisited, Michael Gerber's The E-Myth Revisited, right? Most owners start the business because they love what their business is, right? A mechanic owning a garage loves working on cars. But if you run a business, there's an owner entrepreneur role, which is growing the business. There's the manager role, which is running the day-to-day. And there's the team role, which is actually doing the work product of the business. And so it's putting in that layer. It's, have you set your team up for success? If your team are set up for success, they're set up as the brand ambassadors. They're set up to win. They know how to produce results. They understand their role creating outcomes for your customers. You will drive customer loyalty and you will drive profitability. And here's a key piece with this. Anyone who's been on your team for 3 months or more is an expert compared to your customers. And I like to say that your customers don't even know the questions to ask to make an effective buying decision. So if your team are order takers, you are just letting profit run out the door. If your team understand how to be problem solvers, so they're engaging with your customers, they are asking questions to find out what their needs are, they're making recommendations and why the recommendation, then now they're set up. And this is what turns people on. They literally have purpose, because order takers, you can work at, the corner store, and although I say this actually applies to the corner store too, if you want to have a good repeat business. But if you want to turn your team on to understand the purpose, to feel lit up and that they have an impact, they need to be set up to win. They need to understand their role as problem solvers. Yeah,
it's a really valuable lesson. Definitely. I mean, almost doesn't matter what the business is, as you say. It's, because I don't know, maybe something like Amazon. I don't think I've ever had an interaction with an actual customer service person at Amazon.
I have, and I've had good and bad experiences. I have, yes. I had a return that they mucked around with, and if it's not something routine, and there's real issues with companies selling out of China and the games that they play. And anyway, so yes, I have. But in that example, I live in a small town, a village just outside of Toronto, and there is a convenience store that I can 2 minutes walking for me one direction, and I don't go there. I go 2-3 times the distance the other way, because it's a wonderful man who's in there. It's a family business, and I'm greeted every time. I feel welcomed and appreciated. The other one, usually I think it's family owned. It's a different person every time I've been in there. But they're usually on their phone or talking to somebody else, or, they're literally an order taker. I feel more than dismissed. It's like disregarded. So it's not, I don't go there. I don't need to feel that way. So I don't go there. And that's just understanding the importance of creating the experience in a convenience store.
People will travel further for better customer experience, won't they? And I actually do the best of both, because we prefer, so with our online shopping, for food, so groceries, I guess you guys would call it over there, we get that delivered, because going to the shop is a horrible experience, because it's all big chains. They're like, nearest one's half an hour away from us. But if you get it delivered, you get one-to-one service. You get a friendly delivery driver who will talk you through your order and tell you what wasn't in stock and all this sort of thing. And it's just a much better experience. Plus, you don't have the inconvenience, the cost of fuel to drive there, and all of that other stuff on top. So it's an interesting one. So I go less far for better experience. Doesn't really make my point that I started with very well, but you get the idea.
Oh, it does. And I choose, so it's an interesting piece. I choose local as much as possible. I mean, again, passionate advocate, locally owned businesses. What I've noticed is I am no longer willing to drive around to find out what the local shops offer. So I have stores that I've given a monopoly to. I don't go anywhere else. I have a pet food boutique that I just love, right? And I get the food I want. They take fantastic care of me. I walk in, they greet me by name. I can bring my dog in, so I don't go anywhere else. I don't buy pet food anywhere else. So I've given, and I don't check prices. I want good quality. I want good value. I want good selection, and they give it to me. So I don't go anywhere else. So, we grant businesses monopolies, and it's, again, the importance of trust and relationship, because if I didn't have that connection with that store and with that team, then I would shop them around. Then maybe I would get online delivery.
Yeah, I guess in that particular example, what kind of tipped me over the edge was I was in the physical store, and there was something I was looking for and I couldn't find it. So the first member of staff I saw, I asked if she could help me find it. And she sort of gave me this weird look as though I'd asked something offensive and said, "I can't help you. I'm afraid I work in customer service." And then walked off. And I was like, a bit okay. I'm not a customer then, clearly, and just walked out.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So this is definitely not a small business, or this is a chain.
Yes, it's an international chain. I won't name and shame, but
yes, well, it's like, well, I will. So it's like the airline industries, and Air Canada is like the worst as far as this. The people who work in customer service don't think what they do has an impact at all. And so what's the byline? We're not happy until you're not happy.
Yeah, that's the wrong way around. Anyway.
Yes, but if you've ever dealt with customer service with Air Canada, it's true.
Yeah, but it goes to show as well, you're right. We do grant monopolies until we have that bad experience. And then, so it works in both ways, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And for an independently owned business, this is where independently owned businesses, you cannot afford to create those type of experiences, because it costs so much money. Generally, in most businesses that I've seen, regardless of the industry, it takes 3 interactions, 3 transactions, 3 separate purchasing trips before you pay back what it costs to attract a new customer, the acquisition cost. So if you're transactional, you're spending so much money to attract people, and the profitability is when you get repeat traffic. And I'm back to your team. You can design the best experience, have the best store. If your team aren't delivering that aligned experience, doesn't matter.
And another parallel that's just popped into my head as well. You talk about, treating your team as the customers. There's a massive parallel there as well in terms of new customer acquisition versus recruitment cost. So if you're not treating your people well and they leave, you might in the short term save some money by not having to give them that pay rise that they asked for before they left. But you're going to lose probably double that in having to spend the time and the money and potentially agency fees to replace them.
And not create a great experience for your customer. If your customer sees different team members every time they walk in your store or your business, again, it's all relationship based. It's very expensive to have high turnover. I'm back to, the profitability of your business. if you're taking care of your team, if you're setting them up to win, if they feel like they're purpose driven and having an impact and what they do matter, then you have much higher team retention, which is like the back end driver of profit, as well as the front end driver of profit.
It's a question of priorities, isn't it? And values and all these other important questions. And
framework, mindset, right? The awareness, especially if a business is struggling, and quite a few are, you're like on a spinning wheel, right? And you need to understand, if you want to make an impact, start with your team.
100% agree. What steps then would you recommend to a leader who perhaps has realized they might be falling short in that area and they want to set up their team to win?
Yes, very good. So there are three pivotal pieces that need to be in place. You need to have a regular communication. It could be a weekly huddle. And this is depending on the size of the team. The owner can think, well, I talk to everybody, but they're not getting the same message, and it's not structured. And for your team to feel like they matter, they need to feel like they're in the loop. So at least once a week. Some teams, some businesses, they do a daily huddle, 15-minute daily huddle. It could be a 15, 20-minute weekly huddle, but no more than that. And then once a month, an hour, that there's more training and discussion involved. In that weekly huddle, you want everyone to report back on what they accomplished the week before. You want to talk about and share what are the key focuses and projects this week. And then everyone commit to what they're going to be working on this week that they're going to report on in the next meeting. So it doesn't take long, essential. So regular communication is the first. The next is the team need to be set up to win. So not just the tasks they're responsible for, but the outcomes. What are the standards of success for their role? They need to know. You could say every customer needs to be greeted when they come in the store. How long? They greeted 5 minutes in or 3 seconds in, 3 steps in. What's the standard of that? All customer calls need to be returned. Great. What's the standard within 2 business hours, within a business day? What are you setting up so the team knows what's expected? So I like to call them position agreements rather than job descriptions, that literally for every task, every role is responsible for. What's the standard of success? And what are the standards for the entire team, right? Do you all wear name tags, that you're on, on the floor at the start of your shift, not walking in the door? What are the standards of success for the entire team? And it takes some work, but the owner doesn't, or the managers don't have to do this themselves. If you've got 3 clerks, for example, on your team, have them write down what they feel they're responsible for and how they produce results, and then use that input and work together and create the standards for the role. It doesn't have to be onerous that one person has to create it all. You have the team engage with this. So the second pillar, if you will, are those position agreements. And then the third is regular feedback. They need to know, are they doing what the standards of the role? Not guesswork. Take the guesswork out. I worked with a pharmacy owner, and he just put this very simple structure in place, these 3 pillars, if you will, and it took some time to do it. But the outcome of it was he said he felt that his team, he had a great team. They're very committed to the pharmacy, but his team, he felt, were guessing 80% of the time what he expected of them. When he put these 3 pillars in place, that guesswork was taken out, and the productivity and results of his team dramatically accelerated. Plus, the morale increased.
Yeah, position agreements. I really like that. I've always hated job description. It's such a depressing phrase, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
And I guess the common theme for all 3 of those is communication, isn't it? And
yes.
Ultimately, that's a leader's responsibility. So there we go. We've tied it back to leadership again. I mean, I spent most of my career before I was doing this in office-based roles, and I very, very quickly kind of came to the conclusion that one of the most toxic things for a culture in that kind of business is closed-door meetings, and the fact that you're having one every 20 minutes. And all the bosses and important people, in inverted commas, disappear into the meeting room, close the door, and everyone else, they never know what's happening. They don't know what's being spoken about. there's no communication, nobody, and it's that first pillar you were talking about. It's exactly that. Keep people in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
What are the biggest leadership lessons that you've picked up from your career so far?
I like this, there's a Chinese proverb, and I won't say it correctly, but it's something like the true outcome of leadership is at the end of the day, people think they've done it themselves. So another way of saying that, Jim Collins in his Good to Great book, level 4 leaders create a great company that produces results, and when they leave, the company collapses. Level 5 leaders, you may or may not know their name, but the company produces outstanding results, and when the leader leaves, they leave them in better shape than when they were in place. So there's a couple pieces with this. That listening is one of our most important skill sets. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen first. Set people up for success and tap into their talent. I read a great blog post. I think the man's name was Amit Kassar. Anyways, he said, my number one job as a leader is to get fired. And I loved it, right? It's like he's always looking for what are his responsibilities and what are his team's responsibilities, and who on his team can take over what he's currently doing so he can continue to lead his business forward, right? An entrepreneur's role is running a profitable, growing business. So all those things you're doing today are stopping you from growing your business to tomorrow, the future forward. And so who can do that? And your team are not extensions of you. I mean, you can grow to a certain level that you're micromanaging everybody. But if you really want to, just dramatically expand, future forward, create something beyond, then you have to tap into the talents of your team. They're there. And if you want, Daniel Pink in his book Drive said that in today's economy, money's kind of the foundation. You have to pay your team well for what they do, relevant to what they do, but they have to be paid well for what they do. Take it off the table. So, but what really drives people is purpose, development, and autonomy. So purpose, that they feel like they have an impact, they're problem solvers in their role. Development, that they're always growing and engaging, they're learning. And as they learn more, they're able to take on more responsibility, they have more autonomy. And that's when you tap into talent. So I think, leaders, 2 ears, 1 mouth, listen, and really what talent do you have on your team? What's not being utilized because you're the one that's directing everything that happens? How do you step out of that? And again, I'm back to have some great communication. The once a month team meeting, it's a great time to ask a question for an issue in the business, and then shut up and let the team talk. 2
quotes again that occurs to me. To begin with, that is General Eisenhower. He's famous for saying the real art of leadership is persuading someone else to do something you want done and have them think it was their idea.
Yes.
So, it's a bit, I don't know, maybe a sign of the times, that one, because it was probably in the 50s he said that. Maybe it doesn't stand up so well today.
I think it stands up very well today, actually. You
think? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. Well, not as a manipulation, but as an engagement.
Mm.
If you can take the ego out, that you have to be the one that directs it,
mm-hmm.
and instead engage talent, then, absolutely. And your team will come up with ideas that you hadn't thought of that will be brilliant. If you have a team in a business, your team members have more interaction with your customers than you do as an owner or a manager. So you want the team to come up with ideas. One pharmacy I've recently worked with, and the team, they went through a 12-week training with me. And by the end of it, the team were driving. They went to the owner of the pharmacy and said, our main store is really dated. In fact, the shelves are from the 1950s. So we think we need to update it. And the owner agreed. It was just kind of like the backdrop. You don't even see it because you're in there and out, every day. And he ordered in all the new shelving. The team actually came together and got it done on a Saturday after hours in about 2 hours. And they loved it because it was their idea. And it was the huge impact in the business. It was their idea. So again, we have to get out of the way and tap into what are you hearing? What do you see? What are ideas that you think would impact the business?
Another of his quotes that I've always liked that doesn't get as much attention is, I'm going to probably butcher it, but basically it was, you can't lead by hitting people over the head, because that's assault, not leadership. And that's always aligned really well with me, with this idea of kind of that traditional sort of autocratic, the micromanager type leader, and how actually that's not leadership, really powerful one. And of course, yes, I can't remember the who said this one, but it's similar to the blog post you mentioned. The real task of a leader is to make themselves redundant, because they're going to create new leaders who will take their place, and so the organisation will sustain after them. And that's what it's really about, I think.
Yes, and free them up to grow, even if you're not exiting the business. If you want to grow to the next level, Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach, she talks about we have our present company and our future company. The present company is the day-to-day cash flow and processes in place, and the future company is where are you going next. And most entrepreneurs are so stuck in the day-to-day that they don't have any freedom of time or energy to step into, spend more time in the future company. But if you fire yourself from the day-to-day, you can figure out where to grow and expand. Yes, definitely. And it's all about that trust as well, isn't it? You've got to, yes, obviously a leader has to earn the trust of their people, but actually they also have to return that trust, because if you can't let go, then it's because you don't trust people. And I've debated that with many people over the years as to whose problem that is, whether it's about the leader's own mindset, or other people argue quite strongly that it's actually about the people they're managing and they should recruit better people that enable them to trust. And I've gone back and forth loads of times on that over the years. So David, you actually just touched on something I think that's essential. I only work with independently owned businesses, and they can be quite large, but they're, owned and operated by the entrepreneur. So because I find everyone's tied into results. And one of the reasons is that an entrepreneur is, I like to say, they're on the court of life. Everything is a reflection of their leadership. Everything is their whole bit. Your business as an owner, as an entrepreneur, your business is a reflection of your level of leadership. If you want to grow your business, you have to look at, how do I up my level of leadership? And some of that is, letting go of the reins. And how do you do that? Well, how do you set your team up to win with some structure? You have confidence. What reports do you need to get to make sure that you've got your thumb on the pulse, it's done, but you're literally creating a space to go beyond what you know to do because you're tapping into talent. And listen, that takes courage. It really takes courage. But if you consider that our business is a reflection of our leadership, that it also shows you where you need to grow and expand. And that's why I work with entrepreneurs, because they're the ones that are willing to go through that and have that analysis. If they're committed to growth, they have to grow themselves. Yeah, definitely. I think it's too easy to get sort of lost in that, if I trust them and they stuff up, it's my business on the line. And for me, it's got to be trust first. If they do stuff up, that's not always the worst thing in the world, because there's going to be a lesson there for everyone. But B, you're prejudging the outcome. Wait till the mistake happens, then kind of address it together. Don't sort of self-select out before you've even got there. Anyway, it's something more people struggle with than others. I think if you want to grow, first of all, you're exactly right. Mistakes happen in every business. What I don't want to see is the same mistake happen over and over again. In fact, it will happen over and over again until you learn the lesson from it and figure out what needs to be put in place in your business. So I think part of the secret in growing your business and engaging your team is taking blame out of it. One of the distinctions I like is there's a difference between task and result, and there's a difference between fault and problem. So there are a lot of things. This actually came from a Disney Leadership Institute training, that there are a lot of things that for a company are not their fault, right? Like a pharmacy that the prescription's not ready when promised because they're having issues with the insurance company approving that prescription. It's not their fault, it's the insurance company, but it is their problem because it impacts their patient. So how are they interacting with the patient to let them know what they're doing on their behalf, rather than just have a poor experience because the prescription's not ready as promised. Right? So there are a lot of things, but the moment you take blame out of the equation, now you can engage with, okay, so this didn't work. Why didn't it work? What do we need to do differently to have this produce the outcome we want? But if there's blame, nobody wants to touch it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the difference between blame and accountability for me. And I think if it's being put on the shoulders of anyone other than the leader, then it's blame, not accountability in my book. But there we go. That might be controversial as well. Certainly is for some leaders. But anyway, let's move on. What's the best thing then that you've ever seen a leader do? What's stuck in your memory particularly as a great example of it?
Ask questions and then shut up. So, and it really is ask questions and then shut up, because there was a TED Talk that they showed a video on leadership. And it's not the first person who stands up. It's the first follower who creates safety for everyone else to step up. And it was dancing, right? It was this guy out in a hill at a big, there's all these people around, and he gets up and he starts dancing, right? And he's off on his own, and everyone's just looking at him. And then one person steps up and joins him. Now there's two people dancing, and you just saw this huge, merging, people all joined up, and all of a sudden the whole hillside's dancing. It wasn't the first person, it was the second person. And when the second person joined it made it safe for everyone else. So as a leader, again, ask a question, shut up, and then literally really allow the first person to speak, acknowledge, appreciate, and validate the first person on your team to say something, and you open the floodgates. But you have to give enough time and space for that first person to step up, and you validate them. And now you're going to have a discussion. You've created a safe place for team members to participate, and then listen, because that's where the magic comes. If you only hear what you already know, you're missing the point.
There's a lesson there as well about the role of leadership and whether it has to be sat within a named role. Because actually that first person to stand up is also taking a leadership role in that situation. And I think leadership is a skill. It's not a job title. So I think anyone in any level of organization can demonstrate leadership, can apply that skill. And that's a really good example of that in action, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Let's go a little bit back again to some of the areas of your expertise, one of which I know is change management and dealing with crises. A group of crisis, I don't know, whatever the plural of that is. So where do you see opportunities in change and crisis?
So it is back to the crisis interrupts all patterns. That really is the opportunity. I love the saying, when one door closes, another door opens, because it's always the case. In fact, multiple doors usually open. The problem is we spend so much time lamenting the closed door and change that we didn't necessarily want, that we're missing what the opportunity is. So I think we're going to see whole industries pivot. And the best way to make sure you're in front of that is that you're really connected to who your customers are. What are their needs and wants now? And how do you solve those needs and wants? So get creative. And this is, talk about engaging your team. They're kind of your secret weapons. So first of all, I find a lot of businesses don't actually define their target audience. And most businesses have 2 to 5, start with 1, but really get very clear. The more you take care of one particular audience, you fully take care of their needs, the bigger your business will be. Karen Van Cleve, I think her name is Karen Van Cleve. I'm thinking of her book, Stop Overwhelm Now, I think it is. And she's a business coach. She had actually worked with the Anthony Robbins organization. And when she was writing her Stop Overwhelm Now, when she was writing the book, she had to get very clear, who was she speaking to? So who was her target audience? What, her messaging was going to, and it was the first time she identified that her real niche is professional women. So lawyers, accountants, right? Professional licensed women. And so when she wrote the book, Stop Overwhelm Now, to that specific in that specific voice, handling their issues. It's not that she doesn't work with men, it doesn't work with different women, but when she really nailed the messaging for that audience, her business dramatically expanded. And she quotes an Anthony Robbins quote, "You want to market narrowly and serve broadly." So the first step is actually, who are your customers really, like your best fit customers? And then get in touch with them, call them on the phone, invite them for dinner, get a focus group together, do a survey, talk to them, and find out what's going on in their world. What do they like? What do they don't like? What do they like about dealing with your company? What do they don't like with dealing with I read an article about a wildly successful business, and the owner's secret to success was she called everyone to find out what they didn't like about her company. Every single customer got a call about what they didn't, and she always asked, "What do you not like about dealing with us?" And that was, solving that had her company be wildly successful. And so, the opportunity and change is, I think all growth happens on the shoulders of what we've done in the past. So that's what you get to stand on and get to lean on as you figure out what are the problems in your marketplace now, and how do you create a solution for them now? The core of that will be your business, but what it looks like going forward, that future forwarding may be different. And I just want to add a caveat in that, David. I've said this a couple of times. I'm a passionate advocate for locally owned businesses. I think we're in a brick and mortar renaissance. I think more people, in fact, I keep seeing all of this big online brands are now opening retail stores because people want to touch and feel what they're buying. They're okay to buy online if they know what they want to buy. But if they want to have something sorted out, they want to have something, they want to touch it, feel it, have someone give them advice. So you need to be set up as the problem solvers, not as the order takers. Order takers, that can be online. And I also think they need to be hybrid. My local pet food store offers free delivery. You can order online and have it delivered, within an area. And it's how they actually expand into a new community before they set up a brick and mortar store. They offer free delivery 1 day a week, and they start getting the online orders. And when it's built to a certain level, then they look at opening a brick and mortar store.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good way of doing it. I really like the story as well about seeking the negative feedback. Mm-hmm. I think it's similar to the kind of facing the mistakes, because that's where the lessons are, isn't it? It's, it does take a bit of courage, I think, for business owners to do that, because I think the very human reaction is to only go to the customers had a good experience, because you only want to hear good things.
Mm-hmm. And you really want to hear the bad things. And they're not, again, take off blame. It's not like bad. In fact, just as an interesting tidbit from raving fan research is that most raving fans are not customers that everything went well. Raving fans are customers that something went wrong because of how the team and company handled it, turn them into raving fans. So, if you're not finding out what went wrong and embracing it and learning from it and responding to it, then you're missing, a real dynamic, not just for how to grow your business effectively, but how to connect with patients and have them be raving fans and your marketers in your community.
Yeah, you're missing that opportunity in the crisis, aren't you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. What one piece of advice then, what would be the best piece of advice, if you like, that you could offer to someone who's just been made a manager for the first time, or starting their first business, leading people and never have before?
Sit down and talk to all of your people. It doesn't have to be long, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, no more. Talk to your people. What do they like? What do they not like? Where do they see themselves in a year? Where do they feel like they make a contribution? Talk to your people and set up your people talking to your customers.
Yeah. Back to communication again, isn't it? Absolutely.
It's all communication. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Start as you mean to go on. 100%. Mm-hmm. I really like that.
Leadership Heroes.
Well, time's been flying. It always does on these. Must be because of how much I enjoy these conversations. So we're on the last question, sadly. And I call this one Leadership Heroes. And it's some people struggle with this more than others, but we'll see how you get on. If you had to pick one person who's, alive or dead, past, present, real, fictitious, who you would say perfectly embodies leadership, who would that be and why?
Actually, two people come to mind. One might be controversial, given that we're talking in the UK. The first one I'm going to say is Peter Drucker. He was the management guru. He wrote over 50 books. He's passed away. He died a number of years ago at the age of 96. But in the last century, he was the guy. And I just found he asked the best questions. So questions engage the mind, engage people in a way. It's almost like it's a secret weapon. If you're ever having a conflict or not sure where to go with a team member or customer, if you ask a question, turn a statement into a question, you re-engage the conversation rather than, being, brick walls talking at each other. So questions are like a secret weapon. And Peter Drucker asks the best questions. And he was willing to evolve and correct himself. Some of his later books changed some of what he said in earlier books, because he found that they didn't apply anymore, or he found a deeper level. So brilliant. Pretty much any Peter Drucker book is a good read and will move you forward in your business. So that would be one. The other one that might be controversial is Winston Churchill. I go back and I quote Winston Churchill all the time. I've watched or read a number of biographies or biopics on his impact. And I think he had lots of quirks, but he changed the course during a period of time of crisis. And he engaged and empowered and challenged other people to step up because he couldn't do it on his own. So everything I've read, I find interesting. You don't have to be likable. You don't have to be personable. You do have to create, the environment for people to win.
Yeah, two interesting ones. Peter Drucker, I really like. A couple of my favorite quotes on leadership are his. One of which is the one about effective leadership isn't about making speeches or getting people to like you. It's about the results you deliver. It's not about your character attributes or what kind of inverted commas person you are. It's about what you deliver. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of my favorite quotes. Churchill, he is controversial. I think he's one of those characters who's become larger than life in history, and perhaps he wasn't all of the things that people think he was. But at the same time, he did a very difficult job through one of the most difficult periods in our history, especially for this country in the UK.
It definitely didn't look like it was going to go the way that it came out.
No, it didn't. And
he's actually who I quote most often. He's the one that said, never waste a good crisis, right? What's the opportunity in the change? Never waste a good crisis.
Yeah. I think, one of the reasons why he's so controversial, of course, is because he was a product of his time. Our history is quite difficult when you talk about colonialism and other unpleasant things, and he was right in the thick of that for a long time. And in fact, actively wanted to perpetuate a lot of those worse parts of it. And I think he's got more controversial in recent years with things like Brexit. So, like, people on both sides of what was actually quite an acrimonious argument were both sort of holding him up as a logic for their argument. And it's like, so, like, for me, as a Remainer, I probably shouldn't admit that, I might get some hate, but never mind. He was a massive advocate for a united Europe. He supported the EU or what it was called back then. And then he helped create it, and things like the European Convention on Human Rights. Actually, that was written by British politicians and experts.
That's where his never waste a crisis quote came from. It was the bringing together of, Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt. I mean, it was the bringing together to create something else. That's actually where that quote came from.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, of course, the UN as well. I'm sure he was heavily involved in that at its inception. Yeah. But then on the other side of the EU argument, people are like, oh, he was, look at him. He's the biggest advocate of British independence who ever lived. It's like, not sure that I agree with that, but there we go. But it's an interesting one about historical figures, isn't it? And how you can twist the history.
Yeah, because you still have to take in the context of the time frame that they lived in. I'm not a big fan of applying today's thinking and awareness to, past centuries. They are a product of their time. Judge them in the period of time.
No, I agree. I think that the biggest lesson I take from Churchill is that actually his views changed over time. So if you look at 1915, 1918 Churchill, he would have been probably quite heavily against women's suffrage. He would have been quite heavily opinionated about colonialism and racial politics and all those kind of things. But then if you go and talk to him in the 1960s, well, maybe the 1950s, he started to go a bit downhill, didn't he? Completely different views. He was pro-Europe, he was anti-war, all of these other things that he never would have been in his youth. So I think when there's a character who's been so heavily involved in a period of history over such a long time, because he did have a relatively productive professional life, didn't he? You can't take one snapshot out of one quote that they've said and then say, oh, well, that means he would have said this or been for this or against that. But
it's back to your Peter Drucker quote.
Indeed.
It's about the outcome.
Absolutely. And ultimately, we ended up in the EU and the Economic Community, I think it was called back then. But anyway, yes. Showing my politics again. I'll get off my soapbox. That was a great conversation. Thank you very much, Patti, for your time. I think one thing I'd always do at the end is give my guests an opportunity to talk about their book or point the listeners to their website or anything else that you may wish to direct them towards if they want to learn more about you.
Sounds great. Thank you, David. So my book, Up Solutions, Turning Your Team into Heroes and Your Customers into Raving Fans, I actually go through the first chapter is the opportunity and change. The fourth chapter is the Absolution recipe, that if you train your team, this is how they're set up to be problem solvers. And then the rest of the book is that foundation on engaging and creating an environment your team are set up to win. So there's that. And then I've created a resource page that, there's a link to show you where you can buy the book, but there's also the Touchpoint Scorecard, which is an exercise I created that I recommend you do with your team to really evaluate the experience you're creating at different touch points in your business. It's a free download. You choose the one that's most relevant for your industry. And then there's also a short video that you can watch with your team on showing you how to use it as a tool. So the link to that, my website is pattimara.com, pattimara.com. And the link for the resource page is pattimara.com, Leading with Integrity.
Fantastic. And I'll put the link to that in the episode notes as well, so the listeners can find it easily. Well, that was great. Thank you again, Patti, and have a good rest of your day, because you've got a whole day ahead of you, haven't you?
I do. Different time frame. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It was a pleasure.
You're most welcome. Thank you for coming. Thanks again, Patti. And listeners, if you do want to learn more about what Patti does and perhaps get a copy of her book, then all of those links that you'll be needing are in the episode description. So do check those out and maybe get in touch and see if you'd like to work with her. If leadership is more of an issue for you right now, or if some of the people in your business and the engagement between your staff and your management isn't quite working properly, or if you are a new manager who's struggling to take on that leadership role for the first time, please do get in touch with me as well. You can learn more about leading with integrity. Again, I've put the link in the episode description. That's all for today. Run out of time again, unfortunately, but I hope you'll join me again next time. And in the meantime, take care and be a leader, not a boss.